The medical scanner beeped 3 times before shutting itself off. Danny Reed opened his eyes to a ceiling that glowed soft pink, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Everything felt wrong. The air tasted too clean, filtered through systems that removed every trace of the dust and metal he was used to breathing. His body felt heavy, pressed down by gravity that seemed stronger than it should be, yet somehow the bed beneath him threatened to collapse under his weight. He tried to sit up and heard a sharp crack. The side railing snapped clean off, dangling from bent supports that looked like they were made of hardened foam. Danny froze, staring at the broken piece in his hand. He had barely touched it. A door slid open with a musical chime, and something small rushed into the room. Danny's first thought was that someone had let a rabbit loose on the station. His second thought, when the rabbit stood upright on 2 legs and started frantically tapping at a wall panel with 4 separate arms, was that he definitely was not on his cargo hauler anymore. The creature spun around, and Danny found himself looking into enormous eyes that took up half of its face. It clutched a medical device to its chest with 2 of its arms, while the other 2 gestured frantically in the air. "Please do not move," the creature said in perfect English, though its voice trembled. "Your vital signs are extremely dangerous. Heart rate elevated, muscle density off all charts, bone structure impossibly dense. You should not be conscious. You should not be alive." Danny looked down at himself. Same worn work clothes he had been wearing when the hauler's engine started making that grinding noise. Same calloused hands from years of loading freight containers. Same scar on his forearm from that time, a cargo net snapped back. "I feel fine," he said carefully. The creature made a sound somewhere between a squeak and a wheeze. "Fine. Your calcium levels alone could kill 3 of my species. Your resting blood pressure would cause immediate system failure in anyone aboard this station. What kind of world produces beings like you?" Before Danny could answer, another figure entered the room. This one moved on 6 legs, its body segmented like an insect but covered in smooth gray plates. Compound eyes regarded him with something that might have been curiosity. "Administrator Lissa," the rabbit creature said quickly. "I was just explaining to the specimen that his biology is incompatible with known life." "I have a name," Danny said. "Danny Reed, and I am not a specimen." Lissa's head tilted in a way that suggested acknowledgement. "Of course. My apologies, Danny Reed. I am Lissa, administrator of Harmony's Rest Station. This is Pip, our medical officer. We found your vessel drifting near our trade route, emergency beacon active. The ship's database was corrupted, but we managed to extract you before life support failed completely." Danny's mind raced through the last thing he remembered, the hauler shaking violently, alarms screaming about core containment, his fingers flying over controls that stopped responding. Then nothing. "How long was I out?" 43 hours, Pip said, consulting the medical device. "We had to construct a special containment field just to keep you stable. Your body kept trying to reject our atmosphere as too pure." Danny looked around the room again, really seeing it this time. Everything was rounded, soft, designed for beings much smaller and apparently much more fragile than himself. The walls were pastel colors that probably looked soothing to the station's residents but reminded Danny of a children's playroom. Even the lighting was gentle, barely bright enough for him to see clearly. "Where exactly am I?" Lissa moved closer, though Pip noticeably stepped back. "You are in the fringe sectors of collective space. We are a trade station serving 847 different species, though I must tell you, we have no record of your species in our databases." "Human," Danny said. "From Earth. We have been exploring space for about 200 years now, but mostly staying close to home. Haven't run into many aliens." "Earth?" Lissa repeated the word like she was tasting it. "The database shows one match for that designation, a planet listed in the Forbidden Zones. Class 12 Deathworld, extreme gravity, toxic atmosphere, deadly microbial life, tectonic instability, and regular extinction-level events. Danny almost laughed. That is just Earth, we call it home. Pip made that wee squeak sound again. Nothing lives on Class 12 worlds. The collective has surveyed thousands of them. They are graveyards where evolution goes to die. Well, Danny said, swinging his legs off the bed and hearing something else crack in the frame. Clearly your database needs updating. He stood up slowly, and both aliens took another step back. The ceiling was maybe half a meter above his head. He could probably reach up and touch it without fully extending his arms. The gravity, which had felt heavy when he was lying down, suddenly felt almost normal now that he was standing, maybe slightly lighter than Earth standard. "This is your normal gravity?" he asked. Lissa nodded. 0.38 standard, comfortable for most species. Why? Danny did some quick math in his head. If this was their standard, Earth pulled nearly 3 times harder. No wonder everything here felt like it was made of foam. "We need to discuss what happens next," Lissa said. "The collective has protocols for first contact with new species, especially those from dangerous worlds. There will be questions, examinations, possibly quarantine until we understand your biology better." An alarm shattered the quiet conversation. Not the gentle chimes Danny had heard before, but an actual alarm that made Pip's ears flatten against its head. Lissa's antennae snapped straight up, and she rushed to a wall panel. Danny watched as her calm demeanor cracked. The panel displayed something in a language he could not read, but the flashing red symbols needed no translation. "What is happening?" Lissa turned, and for the first time since entering the room, Danny saw fear in those compound eyes. 3 vessels just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They are broadcasting on all frequencies. Harvester fleet. They are demanding we surrender all resources and prepare for boarding. "Harvesters." "Raiders," Lissa said quietly. "They hit stations in the fringe where the collective defense fleets cannot reach quickly. They take what they want and leave us barely able to survive until the next supply ship arrives." "What about weapons, defenses?" Pip stared at him like he had suggested setting the station on fire. "We do not have weapons. No one has weapons. The collective has been at peace for 6,000 years. We negotiate, we trade, we coexist." "Then what do you do when someone does not want to negotiate?" Lissa's silence was answer enough. Danny moved to the window and looked out at the 3 ships approaching Harmony's rest. They were massive, angular, nothing like the smooth curves of the station. Even from here, he could see weapon ports and boarding craft attached to their hulls. He thought about the thousands of beings on this station who had never known violence, never had to fight for anything. He thought about Pip, terrified just looking at his bone density readings. He thought about Lissa, trying so hard to be brave while her entire world fell apart. "Do you have tools?" Danny asked. "Industrial equipment, anything I can use?" Lissa and Pip exchanged glances. "Why?" Lissa asked. Danny pressed his hand against the window, feeling the material flex slightly under his touch. Everything here was so fragile, so peaceful, so utterly unprepared for what was coming. "Because someone needs to teach these harvesters that even in the fringe, some places are not worth the trouble." Danny followed Lissa through corridors that seemed designed for a completely different understanding of space. Everything curved and flowed, with no sharp corners or hard edges. Soft lighting tracked their movement, brightening ahead and dimming behind. Station residents pressed themselves against walls as the trio passed, their eyes wide with fear that had nothing to do with Danny and everything to do with the ships growing larger in every viewport. The lockdown protocol, Danny learned, consisted of gentle music piped through speakers and automated voices, suggesting everyone proceed calmly to designated safe rooms. No blast doors, no security checkpoints, no emergency armories. Just cushioned rooms where frightened beings huddled together and waited for whatever came next. "The cargo bay," Lissa said, gesturing to a large set of doors. "We have industrial equipment here for station repairs and resource processing. I do not understand what you hope to accomplish." Danny stepped through and felt a small surge of relief. Here, finally, was something that made sense. Cargo containers stacked in organized rows, loading equipment designed to move heavy freight, cutting tools for breaking down salvage, and in the far corner, a mining laser array meant for asteroid processing. "You use this to cut apart rocks?" he asked, running his hand along the laser housing. Pip nodded nervously. "For mineral extraction, but it has safety limiters to prevent accidental discharge. You would need override codes, and even then, the targeting system only works on registered mining coordinates." "Can you get me those codes?" Lissa's antennae twitched. "That equipment is not meant for what you are suggesting. Even if you could bypass the safeties, it is designed to cut stone, not ship hulls, and certainly not to be used as some kind of weapon." "I am not trying to destroy their ships," Danny said, already examining the laser's mounting system. "I just need to make them think twice about boarding." A new voice crackled through the station's communication system, cold and matter-of-fact. "Attention Harmony's Rest. This is Commander Rake of the Harvester Fleet. You will open all docking bays and prepare resource manifests. Resistance is pointless. Compliance is mandatory. You have 30 minutes. Pip's ears flattened completely against its head. They always give 30 minutes, long enough for fear to spread, short enough that we cannot mount any kind of organization, not that we would know how. Danny looked at the two aliens who had shown him nothing but kindness since he woke up. Lissa, trying to maintain composure while her world crumbled. Pip, terrified but still standing here instead of hiding with the others. "Listen," he said quietly, "I need you to trust me. Get me the override codes for this equipment. Show me where the gravity plating controls are, and then I need both of you to get somewhere safe." "What are you planning?" Lissa asked. "Something humans learned a long time ago. Sometimes the best way to avoid a fight is to make the other side believe fighting you is too expensive." 25 minutes later, Danny stood alone in the cargo bay, watching the Harvester boarding craft detach from their mother ships. The bay doors were unlocked and ready to receive them, just as Commander Rake had demanded. The mining laser was now mounted on a mobile platform, its safety limiters disabled thanks to Pip's increasingly frantic coding. Cargo containers were positioned to create channels and choke points. And most importantly, the gravity plating in this section of the station was now linked to a manual control panel within Danny's reach. The boarding craft docked with a heavy clang that echoed through the empty bay. Pressurization equalized with a hiss, and the airlock door slid open. 6 figures emerged, armored and armed with weapons that looked brutal even by Earth standards. They moved with the confidence of beings who had done this dozens of times before, expecting no resistance, anticipating no problems. Their leader, whose armor bore markings Danny assumed meant rank, surveyed the empty cargo bay with visible satisfaction. Then his eyes found Danny, standing alone among the containers. The Harvester said something in a language Danny did not understand, but the tone was clear, amusement mixed with contempt. He raised his weapon slightly, not quite aiming but making the threat obvious. Danny pressed the first button on his control panel. The gravity plating activated, ramping up from the station's gentle 0.38 standard to Earth's full 1.0 in 3 seconds. The effect was immediate and devastating. All 6 Harvesters collapsed, their legs buckling under weight they had never experienced. Their armor, designed for low-gravity combat, suddenly became a crushing burden. Weapons clattered to the deck as arms struggled just to prevent faces from smashing into the floor. Danny walked forward slowly, his body moving easily through gravity that felt like home. He stopped in front of the leader, who was now on hands and knees, breathing hard through his helmet's respirator. "This area is restricted," Danny said calmly. "Turn around and leave." The harvester tried to speak, but the words came out as gasps. Danny could see confusion in those eyes, then dawning realization that something fundamentally wrong was happening. Another voice crackled through the comm system, but this one came from Danny's stolen communication device. Boarding Team 1, report status. Why have you stopped transmitting? Danny picked up the fallen weapon with one hand, felt its weight, then set it aside. Too light to be useful, probably meant for show more than actual combat. He grabbed a cargo strap from a nearby container and began securing the struggling harvesters, being careful not to hurt them. They were already suffering enough under the increased gravity. I repeat, Boarding Team 1 report. The second boarding craft was already approaching the bay. Danny could see it through the viewport coming in fast. He reached for the mining laser controls and triggered the safety override Pip had shown him. The system protested, warning lights flashing, but he pushed past each warning until the laser powered up far beyond its normal operating parameters. The second craft's docking clamp extended. Danny aimed the mining laser and fired a sustained burst, not at the craft itself, but at the docking port it was trying to connect to. Metal melted and fused, sealing the port completely. The craft bounced off, unable to achieve hard seal. Boarding Team 2 abort. Repeat, abort docking. Danny activated the cargo bay's external communication system. This is Danny Reed, currently defending Harmony's rest station. Tell Commander Rake that if he wants to continue this boarding action, he is going to lose a lot more than his dignity. Silence stretched across the void. Danny counted heartbeats, waiting to see if Rake would call his bluff and simply start blasting the station apart. Then a new voice came through, deeper and colder than the previous communications. Danny Reed, an interesting name, an interesting development. You have disabled one team and prevented another from boarding. Impressive, but ultimately futile. I have 3 ships, dozens of soldiers and weapons that can crack this station open like an egg. True, Danny admitted. But then you would not get the resources you came for. You would just have debris and dead civilians. Is that really worth it? Another pause. Danny could almost hear Rake thinking, calculating, weighing options. What do you propose? You leave. You tell the other harvester crews that Harmony's rest is under new management, and I do not spend the next 30 minutes teaching your soldiers what it means to fight someone from a death world. Bold words for someone who cannot leave that cargo bay without exposing the rest of the station. Danny smiled, knowing Rake could not see it, but hopping the confidence carried through his voice. I do not need to leave. You need to get past me. There is a difference. The tactical situation was actually terrible, Danny knew. He could hold this bay, maybe take out another boarding team or 2, but eventually they would find another way in or simply decide the station was not worth the trouble and slag it from orbit. He needed Rake to make a choice, to decide that retreat was preferable to escalation. The long-range sensors, their readings displayed on nearby panels, suddenly lit up with a new contact. Something massive had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Rake's voice came back immediately, but the cold confidence was gone, replaced by something Danny recognized from his own species, primal fear. All teams returned to ships. Emergency jump preparations. Move now. What is happening? Danny asked, but Rake had already cut the channel. The captured harvesters were struggling to their feet, released from the increased gravity. They stumbled toward their boarding craft without looking back, moving with desperate urgency. Danny pulled up the long-range sensor display, trying to understand what could make hardened raiders flee so quickly. The new contact was enormous, easily twice the size of the largest harvester vessel, and its energy signature read like nothing in the station's database. Lissa's voice came through his communicator, shaking with terror. Danny, you need to see this. The harvesters are running. All 3 ships, emergency faster-than-light jump. They are leaving us. What scared them? something that should not exist anymore, something from our oldest nightmares. The thing that dropped out of faster-than-light travel did not look like a ship. It looked like something that had consumed ships and worn their parts like trophies. Biomechanical surfaces pulsed with sickly bioluminescence. Metal plating fused with what appeared to be organic tissue. Engine ports leaked energy that twisted light around it in nauseating patterns. Danny stood in the station's observation deck, surrounded by aliens who had stopped fleeing to designated safe rooms and now simply stared at their approaching doom with the resignation of prey animals spotting a predator. Lissa worked at a terminal, pulling up records that had not been accessed in centuries. Her 6 legs trembled as she read. Devourers, the collective's first great enemy. They nearly destroyed us 6,000 years ago, consuming worlds to fuel their endless expansion. We thought they were extinct. The last one was destroyed 300 years ago by leading it into a collapsing star system. But one survived, Pip whispered, all 4 arms wrapped around itself in a self-comforting gesture. Or it woke up, Lissa said. The records suggest they can go dormant for centuries, waiting for prey to stumble into their territory. Danny studied the approaching ship creature through the viewport. It moved slowly, almost lazily, like something that had all the time in the universe. Energy tendrils extended from its hull, tasting the vacuum, searching for its next meal. Can we run? Our evacuation ships are designed for short-range emergency transport, Lissa explained. They barely reach .2 light speed. The Devourer can match .8 when hunting. It would catch us before we cleared the system. A new sound filled the observation deck. Not alarms this time, but something more primal. The station's population, 3,000 beings from dozens of species, had begun making noises of pure terror. Some wailed, some clicked, some emitted ultrasonic frequencies that made Danny's teeth hurt. It was the sound of civilizations who had forgotten violence, suddenly remembering why their ancestors learned fear. How did the collective fight them before? Danny asked. Lissa pulled up tactical records, though her movements were mechanical, going through motions without hope. We did not fight them. Fighting was impossible. They consume energy weapons, absorb kinetic impacts, adapt to every attack. Our ancestors won by sacrifice. They loaded old ships with antimatter bombs and volunteers, then flew directly into the Devourer cores, destroying them from within. And the volunteers never survived. Danny watched the Devourer extend another tendril, this one reaching toward the station. Where it touched the outer hull, metal began to dissolve, breaking down into component atoms that flowed back along the tendril like nutrients through a vein. Station residents who had been paralyzed suddenly erupted into panic. The safe rooms were abandoned as beings scrambled for evacuation ships. Danny saw parents clutching children, saw the elderly being helped by the young, saw entire family units pressing toward the docking bays in desperate waves. How long until the evacuation ships are ready? He asked. 17 minutes to full power-up, Pip said, checking a readout. They need to heat the fusion cores from cold start. Safety protocols. Override them. But the cores could destabilize. Pip. Danny grabbed the small medical officer gently by the shoulders, careful of his strength. Right now, I need those ships ready in 5 minutes, even if they explode the moment everyone is aboard. 5 minutes gives them a chance. 17 minutes means they die here. Pip's enormous eyes met his, and Danny saw the moment fear transformed into determination. The medical officer ran toward the docking control center, all 4 arms already working a portable terminal. Danny turned back to Lissa. I need to know everything about Devourer biology, weaknesses, blind spots, anything your ancestors learned. There are no weaknesses. That is the point. They are apex predators that evolved to consume civilizations. Everything has weaknesses. Danny started scrolling through the records himself, scanning faster than any collective species could manage. his Earth-evolved brain processing information at speeds these gentle beings never needed to develop. Here, core temperature readings from the last known devourer. It ran hot, much hotter than the surrounding hull. Why? The digestion process generates massive heat. They have to vent it constantly or cook themselves from within. So if we could overload that process, force feed it more energy than it can handle. Lissa's antennae snapped upright. The asteroid field. There is a large nickel-iron asteroid in nearby orbit, rich in radioactive isotopes, if we could superheat it. The mining laser. It would take the entire station's power output to heat an asteroid that large to the necessary temperature. We would have no shields, no life support, no propulsion. But the Devourer would sense all that energy being released and investigate, Danny said, already running toward the cargo bay. Predators chase movement. We make the asteroid look like a bigger meal than the station. The next 3 minutes were chaos. Danny coordinated with station engineers who had never worked under time pressure, who had never considered that machinery might need to operate beyond safety specifications. Together, they rerouted every power system in Harmony's rest, creating a feedback loop that would channel everything into the mining laser array. Pip's voice crackled over the communicator. Evacuation ships are launching. Cores are unstable, but they are moving. Danny, you need to get on one of them. Not yet. Someone has to fire the laser at exactly the right moment. The targeting computer can handle that. Danny looked at the manual controls, then at the Devourer steadily consuming the station's outer hull. No computer is going to know when to pull the trigger on this. It has to be manual. Through the viewport, he watched the first evacuation ships launch, their engines burning far hotter than design specifications allowed. They scattered in different directions, following a basic survival pattern. Make the predator choose which prey to chase. The Devourer paused in its consumption, energy tendrils swaying as it sensed the new movement. For a moment, Danny thought it would pursue the ships. Then it returned to feeding on the station, recognizing the larger meal. Pip, I need you and Lissa on one of those ships. We are staying, Lissa said firmly. This is our station, our people. If you are standing, we are standing. Danny wanted to argue, but there was no time. The station's power levels were approaching critical as every system fed into the mining laser. Emergency lighting failed. Gravity plating flickered. The air began tasting stale as life support diverted its energy. He aligned the laser manually, targeting the nickel-iron asteroid. The distance was significant. The target was moving in its orbital path, and he would only get one shot before the station's power cells burned out completely. The Devourer's consumption accelerated. It had breached through to the residential sections now. Danny tried not to think about the beings who had not made it to evacuation ships, who were dying right now as their homes dissolved around them. He fired. The mining laser, operating at 3,000% beyond safety limits, carved through space in a brilliant orange beam. It struck the asteroid and kept firing, pouring energy into the rock until its surface began to glow, then superheat, then partially liquefy. The station went dark, every system offline, emergency power depleted. They were drifting now, a dead hulk in space. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the Devourer's tendrils retracted from Harmony's rest with shocking speed. The entire biomechanical ship creature oriented toward the glowing asteroid, drawn by the massive energy signature like a moth to flame. It abandoned the station completely, moving toward the superheated rock with terrifying acceleration. Energy tendrils wrapped around the asteroid and began feeding, pulling thermal energy and radiation into its core. It worked, Lissa breathed. You actually made it choose. Danny watched through the viewport, using the residual glow from the asteroid to see. The Devourer consumed faster now, desperate for the energy. And that was when he noticed what he had hoped to see. The creature's hull was damaged, cracked in places, leaking energy it could not afford to lose. "It is dying," he said quietly. "That is why it is here, why it is alone. It has been consuming to stay alive, but it is not enough." "Then when it finishes the asteroid," Pip said, voice hollow, "it will come back for us. And we have no power to run, no power to fight, nothing." Danny stared at the feeding devourer, watching it gorge itself on the asteroid's energy. An idea formed. Terrible and desperate, and possibly insane. "What if we did not run?" he said slowly. "What if we made sure it could never hunt again?" Lissa turned to look at him, and in the dim light reflecting off the devourer's bioluminescence, Danny saw understanding dawn in her compound eyes. "No, absolutely not. The environment inside a devourer is toxic, superheated, completely lethal." "To collective species," Danny agreed. "But I am from a Class 12 death world. Maybe I can survive long enough." "To do what?" Danny pulled up the ancient records again, studying the final battles against the devourers. "Your ancestors loaded ships with antimatter and flew them into the cores. But we do not have antimatter. What we do have are the station's backup reactor cells. If I can get inside, reach its core and overload them." "You would die." "Maybe, probably. But those evacuation ships are still vulnerable. That thing will hunt them down once it finishes feeding. Unless we stop it here." Pip made a sound of distress. "This is insane. We just met you. You owe us nothing. Why would you sacrifice yourself?" Danny thought about his answer for a moment, watching the dying devourer consume the asteroid with desperate hunger. He thought about the beings huddled in evacuation ships. He thought about Lissa trying to be brave and Pip overcoming fear to help. He thought about a station full of people who had shown him kindness even though everything about him terrified them. "Because someone has to," he said simply. "And right now, I am the only one who can." The maintenance pod was never meant for this. It was designed to carry repair crews on gentle trips between station sections, not to approach something that consumed starships for breakfast. Danny sat in the cramped cockpit, wearing an environmental suit that Pip had frantically modified to handle higher temperatures and toxic atmospheres. The suit wheezed with each breath he took, its filters already complaining about the energy-saturated space around the devourer. Strapped to the pod's exterior were 3 of the station's backup reactor cells. Each one was capable of powering a small outpost for a decade. Together, if overloaded properly, they could theoretically release enough energy to tear apart a ship from the inside. Theoretically. "Danny, your vital signs are elevated," Pip's voice crackled through the communicator. The medical officer had refused to evacuate, staying with Lissa to monitor Danny's approach. "Heart rate 130, blood pressure rising. Are you experiencing fear?" "Of course I am experiencing fear," Danny replied, guiding the pod closer to the devourer. "I am about to break into something that eats starships. Fear is the appropriate response." The devourer had finished consuming the asteroid. What remained was a field of molten debris, glowing red and orange as it cooled in the vacuum. The creature ship was turning now, its attention returning to Harmony's rest station. But it moved slowly, sluggishly. The feeding had helped, but not enough. Danny could see the damage more clearly now. The devourer's hull was ancient, pocked with scars from battles fought millennia ago. Energy leaked from cracks in its biomechanical armor. Sections of its organic tissue had necrotized dead flesh that the creature could not repair. It was old, wounded, and desperate. Almost Danny felt sorry for it. Then he remembered the station residents who had died when it started feeding, and his sympathy hardened into resolve. "I am approaching a breach in the outer hull," he reported. "Looks like an old wound that never healed properly. I am going in." "The internal environment will be extreme," Lissa warned. "Temperature estimates put it at 200 degrees standard. Atmosphere is trace amounts of methane and ammonia with high radiation levels. Danny, even for a human, this is beyond survival parameters." Good thing I am from Earth, where survival parameters are suggestions. The breach was larger up close, a tear in the hull that wept bioluminescent fluid into space. Danny maneuvered the maintenance pod through carefully, trying not to think about what would happen if the wound suddenly sealed with him inside. The pod scraped against organic tissue that felt disturbingly warm even through the hull plating. Then he was through, and his first thought was that he had flown into the belly of a living nightmare. The interior of the Devourer looked like someone had mixed a spaceship with the inside of a giant organism, and then set the whole thing on fire. Corridors pulsed with light that came from veins of bioluminescent fluid running through the walls. Conduits that might have been technological or biological or both twisted overhead, carrying energy that made the hair on Danny's arms stand up even through the suit. The temperature gauge on his suit immediately spiked into the red zone. He abandoned the maintenance pod, knowing he would never make it back to it anyway. The reactor cells went into a makeshift sled that he dragged behind him, their weight manageable even in the fluctuating gravity. The Devourer noticed him immediately. Of course it did. He was foreign matter inside its body, a virus in its system. The walls around him contracted, trying to crush him. Danny pushed through, using his earthborn strength to force the passage open. Biomechanical organisms dropped from the ceiling, things that looked like metal insects with too many legs and mandibles that sparked with electricity. He swatted them away, crushed them when they got too close, kept moving deeper. The suit's cooling system was already failing, and Danny felt sweat pouring down his face. His breathing came in gasps as the filters struggled to process the toxic atmosphere. "Danny, your core temperature is reaching dangerous levels," Pip said urgently. "You need to turn back." "Cannot turn back, have to reach the core." The corridor opened into a larger chamber, and Danny stopped to stare. It was beautiful in a terrible way. A massive organic reactor pulsed at the center, surrounded by energy coils that fed power throughout the ship. Stolen energy from 1,000 consumed vessels swirled in patterns that hurt to look at directly. This was the Devourer's heart, its power source, its life. And it was failing. Danny could see the deterioration, the systems breaking down, the energy flow becoming erratic. The creature was dying by degrees, and it knew it. That knowledge ached through the chamber like a physical presence. He set down the reactor cells and began the process of overloading them, bypassing every safety system, routing their output into a feedback loop that would cascade into critical failure. The process would take time he might not have. Something touched his mind. It was not language, not thought in any human sense. It was older than words, deeper than consciousness. The Devourer was aware of him, truly aware, and it was trying to communicate. Images flooded Danny's vision. A younger galaxy teeming with Devourer ships, a war that spanned centuries, defeat, extinction, dormancy, waking alone to find the universe had moved on without his kind. Loneliness, such terrible loneliness. Danny felt tears on his face, though whether from the toxic atmosphere or genuine emotion he could not say. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I know what it means to be the last, but I cannot let you hunt anymore. Too many innocent beings will die." The Devourer's presence pressed against his mind, not fighting him but sharing. It showed him its perspective, how it saw the universe as energy to consume, how it could not understand the difference between a star and a station, between matter and life. It was not evil. It was simply existing the only way it knew how. "Then let me give you an ending," Danny said softly. "Let me make sure you are not forgotten." The presence withdrew, and Danny could have sworn he felt something like acceptance in its retreat. He returned to the reactor cells, working faster now. His suit was failing, alerts screaming about breached seals and overheating components. His vision swam from the heat and toxic air. His hands shook as he connected the final circuits. The reactor cells began their cascade, energy building toward critical mass. Danny estimated he had 90 seconds before the explosion. He would never make it back to the maintenance pod in time. Even if he could run, even if the Devourer's immune system stopped attacking him, the distance was too far. He thought about his family on Earth, about the crew he used to haul cargo with, about Lissa and Pip, and 3,000 station residents who had trusted him with their lives. He thought about dying alone in the belly of an ancient creature ship, and found he was not as afraid as he expected to be. There was peace in knowing you did the right thing. Danny, Lissa's voice cut through his resignation. The Devourer is releasing the station. Its energy tendrils are retracting. What did you do? Set the charges, Danny said, already moving toward the corridor he had entered through. Maybe, just maybe, if he ran fast enough. 90 seconds to detonation. The maintenance pod is too far. You will never make it. I know. Danny ran anyway because that was what humans did. They ran toward impossible odds. They fought unwinnable battles. They refused to accept defeat until the very end. The corridor seemed longer now, stretching endlessly ahead. The Devourer's immune response had stopped, the biomechanical organisms retreating as if the ship itself had given up fighting him. 60 seconds. His suit's cooling system failed completely. Danny tore the helmet off, gasping in the toxic atmosphere. His lungs burned, his eyes watered, but he could see clearly for the first time since entering. He could run faster without the suit's restrictions. 40 seconds. The breach was ahead. He could see the maintenance pod through the opening. So close. His legs pumped, pushing through gravity that fluctuated wildly as the Devourer's systems began failing in cascade. 20 seconds. He reached the pod, threw himself through the hatch, slammed the emergency launch button. The pod's engines fired, propelling him away from the Devourer at maximum acceleration. 10 seconds. Through the pod's rear viewport, Danny watched the Devourer ship convulse. Energy leaked from every crack, every wound building toward a crescendo. For just a moment, the bioluminescence grew brighter, beautiful, as if the creature was saying goodbye. 0. The explosion was not violent. It was controlled, almost gentle, as the Devourer's systems collapsed inward. The ship creature folded in on itself, energy ribbons spiraling into the void, then fatting to darkness. No debris field, no shockwave, just a quiet ending to something ancient and terrible and alone. Danny's pod tumbled through space, its engines dead, life support failing. He lay back in the pilot's seat, too exhausted to move, too burned to care. His last thought before consciousness faded was simple and true. They would come for him. Lissa, Pip, the station residents, they would not leave him drifting. And in the darkness, as systems failed and cold crept in, Danny smiled. They came back. They actually came back. Waking up hurt less than Danny expected. The medical bay was properly sized now, the bed reinforced to handle his weight, the ceiling high enough that he would not hit his head standing up. Someone had learned from the first time. Pip sat beside the bed, all four arms moving in constant motion as the medical officer monitored displays. When Danny's eyes opened, Pip made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. 3 days, Pip said. You have been unconscious for 3 days. We thought we lost you twice during surgery. Your lungs had chemical burns, your skin had radiation damage, your core temperature reached levels that should have cooked your brain. But you survived. Humans are terrifyingly hard to kill. Danny tried to speak, but his throat felt like sandpaper. Pip immediately offered water through a straw, and Danny drank gratefully. The station. Damaged but repairable. We lost 47 residents in the initial Devourer attack. Memorial services were held yesterday. Their families wanted you to know they do not blame you. They understand you saved everyone else. 47 deaths. Danny felt each one like a weight on his chest. He had been too slow, not fast enough, not smart enough to save them all. Danny, Pip's voice was gentle. Without you, we would have lost 3,000. You gave us a future. Do not diminish that by focusing on what you could not prevent. The door opened, and Lissa entered, followed by what appeared to be half the station's population. They crowded into the medical bay, dozens of different species, all wanting to see the human who had fought a devourer and won. Some brought flowers from their homeworlds. Others brought food that their species considered healing. One brought a small child who stared at Danny with enormous eyes and whispered something in a language Danny did not understand. "She says you are a hero," Lissa translated. "She wants to be brave like you when she grows up." Danny looked at the child, at Pip, at Lissa, at all the gathered beings who had every reason to fear him but instead showed gratitude and affection. He felt something crack inside, some wall he had built between himself and these aliens. They were not just aliens anymore. They were people, his people. Over the next hours, as his strength returned, Danny learned what had happened while he was unconscious. The Harvester fleet had not returned, but they had sent a message. Commander Rake wanted to negotiate, not with the station, but specifically with Danny. The concept of negotiation with a defensive force was new to them, fascinating in a way that made Danny slightly uncomfortable. More interesting was the message from the collective's central government. A diplomatic ship was en route, carrying representatives from dozens of species. They wanted to meet the human, understand Earth, establish formal relations. The fact that Danny had defeated both harvesters and a devourer had sent shockwaves through civilizations that had forgotten violence was possible. "They are calling you the Deathworlder savior in the communications," Lissa said with something that might have been amusement. "There are 17 stations in the fringe requesting you visit them, teach them what you know about defense." "I am not a soldier. I'm a cargo hauler who got lucky." "You are someone who understood what needed to be done and did it anyway. That is more valuable than any weapon." Pip finished a final medical scan and declared Danny fit to move around, though the medical officer insisted on monitoring his recovery. Together with Lissa, they showed Danny what had changed in 3 days. The station had transformed. The gentle curves and soft edges remained, but now there were reinforced sections where station engineers had studied Danny's improvised defenses and improved on them. The mining laser had proper targeting systems. The cargo bay had gravity plating that could shift on command. Emergency response teams drilled regularly, learning procedures that had never existed before. More surprising was the mood. Station residents no longer hid when Danny walked past. They greeted him, thanked him, asked questions about Earth and humans and what life was like on a death world. Children followed him in small groups, chattering in various languages, trying to mimic his walk. "You have given them something they never had," Lissa observed. "Not fear, but the knowledge that they can protect themselves. That peace does not mean helplessness." Danny stood in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Harmony's rest hung in space, scarred but alive, a beacon in the fringe for beings who had learned they could be more than victims. A communication came through from the approaching harvester ship. Rake's face appeared on the screen, and Danny was surprised to see something like respect in those eyes. "Danny Reed, I came to deliver a message in person." "I am listening." "The harvester fleet is dissolving. After word spread about what happened here, our crews began asking why we prey on the weak when we could trade with the strong. Some are returning to legitimate commerce. Others, like myself, are considering a different path." "What path is that?" Rake's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile. "The fringe needs protection. The collective's core fleets are too far away, but harvesters know these sectors, know how to fight. What if instead of raiding stations we defended them, for fair payment of course?" Danny considered this. Former raiders becoming protectors. It was almost poetic. The stations would need to agree, and you would need to prove yourselves trustworthy. "We will, starting with Harmony's rest. Consider this a trial run. My fleet will patrol this sector for the next standard year, no charge. If we prove ourselves, perhaps other stations will hire us. After Rake signed off, Lissa turned to Danny with her antennae raised in what he had learned was amusement. You just changed the entire power structure of the Fringe. Raiders becoming defenders, defense becoming acceptable in the collective, all because you refused to give up. I just did what needed doing. That is exactly my point. The diplomatic ship arrived 2 days later, and Danny found himself in the surreal position of representing Earth to beings who had never imagined humans existed. The diplomats were cautious but curious, asking endless questions about Earth's environment, its dangers, how humans survived and thrived in such harsh conditions. One diplomat, a crystalline being whose species had evolved in zero gravity, asked the question they all seemed to be thinking. Your world tried to kill you at every stage of evolution, yet you survived, even flourished. How? Danny thought about his answer carefully. We adapted. We cooperated. We learned that strength is not just about being tough, but about protecting those who need protecting. Earth made us hard, yes, but it also taught us compassion. Because when everything is trying to kill you, you learn the value of having someone watch your back. The negotiations took weeks, but the outcome was everything Danny could have hoped for. Earth would be contacted, carefully and with preparation. The collective would provide technology and knowledge. Humans would provide perspective and, when needed, protection for stations that requested it. Cultural exchange, not conquest. Partnership, not dominance. Lissa offered Danny a permanent position as Fringe Security Advisor. The role would involve traveling to different stations, teaching them what he had taught Harmony's Rest. Not violence, but readiness. Not weapons, but the courage to stand. Danny accepted, knowing he could never go back to being just a cargo hauler. He had found something more important out here in the Fringe. He had found purpose. Pip threw a celebration that night, inviting the entire station. Beings from dozens of species gathered in the common areas, sharing food and stories. Music played, a blend of different cultural traditions that somehow worked together. Children ran through corridors that had been filled with fear just weeks ago, their laughter echoing off walls that remembered terror. Danny stood among them, a Deathworlder among paradise beings, feeling more at home than he had in years. Lissa approached with a container of Earth whiskey that the diplomatic ship had brought as a gift. She poured 2 glasses, though hers was considerably smaller. To new beginnings, she said, raising her glass. To found family, Danny replied. They drank, and Lissa immediately made a choking sound that Danny had learned meant the alcohol was too strong for her. He laughed, and she joined in, and around them the station celebrated life. The next morning, Danny prepared for his first trip to another station. Pip had packed enough medical supplies to treat a small army, worried about Danny's recovery. Lissa had prepared extensive documentation about defensive strategies. The station residents gathered to say goodbye, though it was temporary. As his ship prepared to depart, Danny looked back at Harmony's Rest one more time. It was no longer just a fragile outpost. It was home. It was the place where a cargo hauler from Earth became something more, where aliens became friends, where peace learned to defend itself. Commander Rake's ship fell into formation beside Danny's, beginning their new role as protectors. Other ships joined them, traders and travelers who had heard the stories and wanted to see the famous human for themselves. Danny activated the communications. Harmony's Rest, this is Reed, departing on schedule, will report back in 3 weeks. Acknowledged, Danny, Lissa replied. Safe travels and thank you for everything. Thank you for giving a lost hauler a second chance. The ships jumped to faster than light, leaving Harmony's Rest behind but carrying its lessons forward. In the Fringe, word was spreading about the Deathworlder who became a savior, about stations learning to protect themselves, about a new way of thinking that balanced peace with strength. And somewhere, on a small blue planet called Earth, Humanity would soon learn that their children had found their place among the stars. 6 months changed everything. Danny Reed stood in what used to be a simple observation deck on Harmony's Rest and watched construction drones work on the new defensive platform. The platform was not a weapon, not really. It was more like a warning system, something that could detect approaching ships and give stations time to prepare. But it represented something far more important than its technical function. It represented choice. The Fringe was different now. 17 stations had implemented similar defensive measures, each one adapted to their specific needs and capabilities. The collective central government had initially been horrified at the concept of stations arming themselves, but the Fringe representatives had been firm. They would remain peaceful, but they would not remain helpless. Pip entered the observation deck, carrying a data tablet with both upper arms while the lower arms held steaming containers of what passed for coffee in this sector. The medical officer had grown more confident over the months, no longer flinching at Danny's presence, treating him like the friend he had become. "The latest reports from the other stations," Pip said, offering Danny a container. "Station 7 successfully repelled a minor raider attack using your gravity plate technique. Station 12 negotiated a trade agreement with a previously hostile faction because they demonstrated they could defend their resources. Station 3 wants you to visit next month to help train their emergency response team." Danny sipped the not-quite coffee and reviewed the reports. Each one showed progress, stations learning to stand without losing their fundamental nature. They were still peaceful, still preferred negotiation to conflict, but now they negotiated from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. "How is the Earth delegation settling in?" Danny asked. Pip's ears twitched with what Danny had learned was amusement, causing quite a stir. Apparently, having 20 humans walking around the collective's diplomatic station is forcing everyone to reconsider their assumptions about Deathworlders, though I heard 3 of them accidentally broke furniture in the guest quarters. That sounds about right. The Earth delegation had arrived 2 months ago, carefully selected diplomats and scientists who could represent humanity without terrifying their hosts. The cultural exchange was proceeding slowly, with both sides learning to navigate fundamental differences in perspective. Earth's military was particularly interested in the collective's technology, while the collective's scientists were fascinated by Earth's biodiversity and human adaptability. Danny had spent weeks helping bridge the gap, translating not just language but entire worldviews, explaining to collective diplomats that humans were not warlike, just prepared, explaining to Earth representatives that the collective's pacifism was not weakness, just a different path evolution had taken. Lissa joined them in the observation deck, moving with the easy confidence of someone who had faced down impossible odds and survived. Her role had expanded beyond station administrator. She now coordinated defensive strategies across multiple fringe stations, becoming the voice of a movement she never expected to lead. "Commander Rake sent another message," she said. "His security forces have been hired by 12 stations now. He is actually turning away contracts because he does not have enough ships. He asked if Earth might be interested in a partnership. Apparently, the concept of private security firms is new to the collective, and he wants to do it properly." Danny smiled. Rake had transformed from raider to entrepreneur, proving that even those who had lived by taking could learn to survive by protecting. The former Harvester commander visited Harmony's Rest regularly now, trading stories and strategies with Danny, building something neither of them had planned. A notification chimed, and Lissa pulled up a communication from the collective's central government. Her antennae rose in surprise. They want to establish a formal defensive academy in the Fringe, teaching peaceful species how to protect themselves without compromising their values. They are asking if you would be willing to help design the curriculum. "Me, I am not a teacher." "You taught us," Pip said quietly. You taught an entire station full of beings who had never considered self-defense how to stand up for themselves. If that is not teaching, what is? Danny thought about the question. In 6 months, he had gone from a cargo hauler who accidentally stumbled into first contact to someone whose actions were reshaping an entire sector of galactic civilization. It was overwhelming, humbling, and terrifying. It was also exactly where he needed to be. "I will help," he said, "but only if the Academy focuses on what really matters, not weapons or tactics, but courage. The courage to protect what you love without becoming what you fight against." Lissa's antennae vibrated with approval. "That is exactly why they asked you." The observation deck's windows showed a view that had become familiar over the months. Harmony's Rest. No longer isolated, now served as a hub for fringe traffic. Ships from dozens of species docked regularly, bringing trade, news, and travelers who wanted to see the place where everything changed. The defensive platforms orbited peacefully, never used but always ready. A small shuttle approached, and Danny recognized the markings. Earth vessel, probably carrying supplies for the diplomatic mission. He watched it dock with practiced efficiency, thinking about how strange it was that human ships now moved freely through collective space, welcomed rather than feared. Pip touched his arm gently with one hand. "You know you have become something of a legend, right? There are children across the fringe who play games where they pretend to be Danny Reed, defending their playgrounds from imaginary devourers. That is terrifying and adorable in equal measure. That is childhood. They are learning that heroes do not have to be warriors, that protecting others is noble, that being from a dangerous place does not make you dangerous." Lissa pulled up a holographic display showing the fringe sector. Each station was marked, connected by trade routes that had grown busier over the months. The region that had once been lawless and vulnerable now thrived with activity. "This is what you built," she said. "Not with weapons or force, but with the simple act of refusing to let others be victims. You showed us we had the strength to change." Danny shook his head. "I did not build this. We built this. Every being who chose to learn, to prepare, to stand up when it mattered. That was never about me being special. It was about everyone else realizing they already had what they needed." A communication came through, flagged as priority. Danny accepted it, and a human face appeared on screen. Admiral Patricia Wong, Earth's liaison to the collective. She looked tired but satisfied. "Danny, I wanted to give you a heads up. The collective's council just voted to establish formal relations with Earth. Trade agreements, technology exchange, cultural programs. We are officially part of the galactic community now." That is incredible news. It gets better. They want to establish a joint human collective outreach program, teaching defensive strategies to Paradise World species, helping them prepare for emergencies without militarizing. They specifically requested you to lead it. Danny looked at Pip and Lissa, seeing the hope in their eyes. He thought about all the stations that still needed help, all the beings who could benefit from learning what Harmony's Rest had learned. "Tell them I accept, but I need a team. Experienced people from both Earth and the collective who understand what we are trying to achieve." "Already on it. I will send you the preliminary roster next week." After the communication ended, Danny walked to the viewport and placed his hand against the transparent material. Outside, the stars shone with the same indifferent beauty they always had, but they felt different now. Less lonely, more welcoming. Pip and Lissa joined him, the three of them standing together in comfortable silence. A human, a rabbit-like alien, and an insectoid administrator. 6 months ago, they had been strangers thrust together by circumstance. Now they were something deeper than friends. They were family. "Do you ever miss Earth?" Lissa asked. "Sometimes," Danny admitted. "I miss the weight of real gravity, the smell of rain, the taste of actual coffee, but Earth will always be there. What we are building here, this only happens once. I do not want to miss it. The accidental hero, Pip said with amusement, who saved the galaxy without meaning to. I did not save the galaxy. I saved one station. Everything else was just people choosing to save themselves. Lissa's antennae moved in a gesture Danny had learned meant affection. Perhaps that is what makes you a hero. You do not see yourself as one. They stood together, watching ships come and go, each one carrying beings who lived a little safer because someone from a death world had refused to let them die helpless. The fringe thrived, the collective evolved, and humanity found its place among the stars not through conquest but through protection. Danny Reed, cargo hauler turned accidental savior, smiled at the future taking shape outside his window. He had learned something important in the past 6 months. Heroism was not about grand gestures or supernatural abilities. It was about ordinary people choosing to do extraordinary things when circumstances demanded it. And sometimes, the most extraordinary thing you could do was simply refuse to give up on those who needed you. Years later, when historians studied the period they called the Fringe Revolution, they would point to countless factors: the Harvester Reformation, the Devourer defeat, the Earth Collective Alliance, but those who lived through it knew the truth. It started with one human who woke up in the wrong place at the wrong time and chose to make it right. Everything else was just the galaxy learning to be brave.